The city of Toronto is not actively trying to get housing development. Let's be very, very clear on this. I mean, they are pushing away development. This idea that a land value tax is going to all of a sudden jack up a lot of developments of the type we want, you know, really ignores all of these other impediments. It's basically we're knocking out, Happy Gilmore's grandma to let Shooter McGavin build a McMansion. Like, I don't see how that really solves anything.
Hi, and welcome to The Missing Middle. I'm Kara Stern.
And I'm Mike Moffat.
And today we're going to talk about the idea of a land value tax as a solution to the housing crisis.
But before we begin that conversation, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you.
So, Mike, recently you got in a little bit of trouble on Twitter when you kind of showed that you weren't the biggest fan of the land value tax idea, that you didn't think it was going to be a good solution to the housing crisis. And so I guess let's start with the obvious question for those who don't know. What is a land value tax?
Yeah, and I have to say to the Twitter folks, first of all, that, I will take the advocates who are finding a solution, even if it's a solution I don't necessarily love. I will take them 10 times out of 10 over the folks who, downplay the housing crisis, the gray-haired folks in the Ottawa bubble who say, oh, it's really not a big deal, or, oh, back in 1971 when I bought a house, et cetera, et cetera. So what is a land value tax? Well, we can think of the existing property tax as having two components, right? So you pay a property tax on a home, on an apartment, or whatever. It basically has two components. One is you're taxing the land, and the second is that you're taxing the actual structure. So what these guys are advocating is basically raising the tax on the land part and then using that money in some other fashion, to reduce some other kind of tax. But it's basically just that taking the existing property tax system and raising the portion on the land side of things.
The way that land value tax has kind of always been described to me is that you charge taxes based on what could be on the land, like the best use of that land. So if you have a single family detached home on the land, but that land could have something that's like a mid-rise on that property or a multiplex, then you charge the same as if it did have a multiplex on it or a mid-rise property. And that way it would encourage people to pick the property that would be the most efficient for that land because they're paying the higher taxes on it anyways, and it really disincentivizes those smaller, worse use of land. Is that not right?
Well, but that essentially is how the system works right now, right? That the value of a piece of land is in part a function of what you can do with it. So that's essentially how the system works already. So that really wouldn't change at all. And that's why I'm a little bit skeptical of when folks say, oh, well, this is going to solve everything. I'm like, we already have that system,
We
right?
don't
And it
though. Like
clearly
the city
has
has,
solved everything.
we don't have that though.
Yeah, we absolutely do. We
Doesn't the city
absolutely
go
do.
around and assess the property that's there and says, we have this is a 3-bedroom home on this land, this is a 1-bedroom home on this land, that so we assess this at this price, and then we assess the bigger home at a higher price because the value is higher. They're not, even if both of those could have 4-bedroom 4-unit homes on there, like right now they're doing it based on the assessment of the actual property that actually exists on that land. At least that's how it's worked as far as I've known in Toronto.
Yeah, and that's how a land value tax would work still. So basically the current system right now is, let's say they take your home and they go, okay, this is, if you sold this house on the market, this is what it would be worth, both the structure and the land. And they do so for my house and everybody else's house. Basically on a land value tax, we're saying, okay, we're going to, instead of valuing or taxing the land and the structure at the same rate, we're going to increase the size on the land part. But ultimately it's whatever the value of the land is. So that actually doesn't change under a land value tax. Basically, all that changes is the annual rate of tax paid on the land.
But is a home that's worth like, let's say you have a home worth $1 million on a small lot, and then you have a home that's, it's been redone, it's totally new, and it's now, they do, when they assess it, like it's worth, $2 million on the exact same plot of land once it's been redone. So that would tell me that it's not the land that they're taxing the property, because the newer one that's bigger would be taxed higher than before they, before they got rid of that bungalow or whatever it was on that land.
Well, remember though that current property tax has two components, right? It has the land component and the structure component. So you're absolutely right that, let's say you put on a more valuable structure, then the structure part of the component you'd pay more tax on it, but you still pay the same amount of tax on the land portion, right? So let's say you and I are neighbors, and this would be fun, and I'm constantly going over to your house and asking for coffee or whatever because I'm running out of stuff, right? Let's say I live in a home that's worth $1 million, and the land is worth 500,000, and the building's worth 500,000. You live next door. You live your land is identical to mine, same size lot and everything, but the structure itself is a $1.5 million structure. So basically what that would mean is that my home, land and building, is worth $1 million. Yours is worth $2 million. We're still paying the same tax on the land. The idea is that you're paying more tax on your structure than I'm paying on mine.
But then right now, what I understand the proposal would be is just get rid of that property structure, and just charge the land value with the assumption that you have the most efficient structure on top, the most expensive structure on top.
Well, and this is where it gets challenging, right? It's hard to nail down what the advocates are actually advocating for. So you're right that I think across the board they're all saying, okay, let's increase the land portion of the tax, and then offset that with something else. It could be that we're offsetting it by eliminating the structure portion, and there are a lot of advocates who advocate for that. Some are saying, actually, let's use some money and eliminate development charges. There's a proposal out there by one group that's saying, okay, let's take that money and lower income taxes, right? So there's actually no one kind of proposal about what to actually do with that money. I would say the most common one is that swap that you're suggesting, that we eliminate the taxes on the building side, the structure side entirely, and just tax the underlying land. I think that's the most common proposal. But there's a variety of different advocates who advocate for a variety of different things, and that's, I think, to be expected.
So let's get back to where we started, which is, why don't you like this idea?
Okay, well, let's to my mind, asking, okay, is should we have a land value tax, is like asking, should you dip your shirt in lemon juice? And the answer is, well, maybe. It depends on what you're trying to accomplish, right? So there are scenarios, and let's take that tax swap case where we're just taxing land and not taxing buildings at all. There are some problems where I actually think that's a really good solution. And I think that's the key, that we need to start by looking at what problem we're trying to solve. So let's say I was advising the state of West Virginia, or some of the municipalities in West Virginia, where it's a state where they're really having trouble attracting young families, attracting industry, but there's a lot of demand in the localized area from Pennsylvania and other places. Then I might actually say, you know what, that would be a very good solution to this. So basically, it's a way to sort of attract capital to come in and say, hey, build whatever you want, and we're not going to increase your building taxes anymore. I think that's a very good solution to that problem. But that's not the problem, say, the city of Toronto has. The city of Toronto is not actively trying to get housing development. Let's be very, very clear on this. I mean, they are pushing away development. So it doesn't really solve that underlying problem. So again, I think we often, or advocates can come at this at the wrong problem where they fall in love with a particular tool, right? It's like, okay, I really love my hammer, and then every problem becomes a nail. Whereas I take the opposite view. I'm like, well, no, let's start with the problem we're trying to solve and then figure out the best tool to use it. But I absolutely think, 100% that there are many situations where I would put a land value tax, near the top of my sort of, list of policy solutions. I just don't think that applies to the situation in Southern Ontario or Lower Mainland BC.
A lot of city councilors would be very upset that you said that they're not actually trying to get development, because a lot of them would say, we are trying to get housing built. We're doing everything we can. And I know that you would we've talked about before about a
Yeah,
development
and
challenges and
if there's one thing that we know is that politicians are always genuine and always, say exactly what's going on and never try and spin the pot. I'm sorry, that is too much Gen X cynicism. I should apologize for that. But my thing is, President Biden always says, you want to see what a politician values, look at their budget. Not what they say. It's just the kind of same thing here. Like, we should judge politicians and political parties by, what they're willing to spend money on, reforms they're willing to put in place, and not just, whatever they say on a campaign speech.
let's assume some of them are wanting development and they actually convince everyone that we should get more development. That's actually our goal here. If they did that, would a land value tax be the way to go?
I say in Southern Ontario, no, simply because there are too many other impediments to building homes. Right, you're not actually going to get more developments by jacking up land value taxes. Advocates might say, okay, well, you're gonna, if we do this, then you're gonna be able to build more apartment buildings in traditional neighborhoods. Except that the zoning doesn't allow for that. The math doesn't work under development charges. The building code doesn't work for that, as the conversation we had with Connor at Speckert. So this idea that a land value tax is going to all of a sudden jack up a lot of developments of the type we want, really ignores all of these other impediments.
It might not cause more development, but wouldn't it convince some people who are paying now all of a sudden really high taxes on their very inefficient use of land? There's maybe single family detached homes. Maybe it would convince them to really start considering seriously changing it into a multiplex or downsizing, or to live somewhere that isn't in that kind of inefficient use of space. Isn't that part of the goal of a lot of these people who want land value tax?
Well, first of all, where are those people going to downsize to?
Maybe they convert their home into a couple smaller units, so then they're able to make, like, they're able to collect more money to pay those high taxes if you suddenly have these very high taxes.
I don't buy that. That some 78-year-old, living in a strawberry box home in an urban city is all of a sudden going to do large renovations. Just using sort of my parents as focus group, and other folks in their 70s and 80s. This idea that oh yeah, they've worked all of their lives, and then they want to go through a multi-year renovation on their home.
What
I'm
if they can't
sorry, like that.
afford the taxes? Would they then downsize into like a condo, for instance?
Well, what condo? Like, that's a lateral move. By the time you do that, you're really not saving that much money. Any money that you're saving gets eaten up in condo fees.
I think that there's a lot of condos that are still a lot cheaper than the single family homes, at least in Toronto. It's still a big downsize in the price, but really, if we're talking about the taxes being so much higher on single family homes and the taxes being so much cheaper, there might be enough of a change there where it would incentivize them to downsize into smaller condos or smaller units elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, but like, let's listen to this argument here, right? That we're basically saying, okay, let's tax the hell out of old people, and hope that it causes them to move into units that are still hideously expensive, that they can't afford, and doesn't meet their
Well,
needs.
less
And this
expensive,
is
and then they can't afford it. If they live in a single family home in Toronto, you can't afford a condo. It might not be your favorite choice, but you can definitely downsize
Right.
from single family home, detached single family home in Toronto to uh, condo in Toronto.
Okay, but what at the end of the day does that accomplish,
It
right?
frees up
So
family
basically,
size homes for people who need that space.
but then how are those families going to pay for that if the land value tax is so high?
I'm not sure how it would work if they would then be the kinds of people who would be able to do those big renovations that your 70 something maybe is not in the place to do right then. Um, but I think and I don't know that this is the best way to do it, but that's kind of what I've always kind of heard from land value tax advocates is it really would free up it would really get rid of people living in single family homes and especially in a single person living in a 4 bedroom single family home that you're really just trying to get people to in some ways right size their homes so it matches what actually is their needs. Of course a lot of people would say, well, who are you to tell me what my needs are or
Exactly.
what I want, but at the same time we have a problem in society. Like, I guess if you look on the individual level there's nothing wrong with that, but in a society level there's a problem right now that we need to solve.
Right, but so here's the basic argument. So we are going to tax the snot out of old people, so forcing them to move. Which I'll note, and I noted on Twitter, is the plot of the movie Happy Gilmore, right? And remember, we're in the movie we're supposed to feel bad. We all feel bad for the grandma who got to taxed out of her house, right? And I suspect society will be the same thing if anybody tried this. The sympathy is going to be with grandma here. So then, okay, so we've taxed this old lady out of her house to move into some hideously expensive condo that doesn't meet her needs. So then somebody else can buy it and renovate it, but because of building code and zoning, what are you going to be able to build there? It's going to be a McMansion, right? So basically, we're knocking out, Happy Gilmore's grandma to let Shooter McGavin build a McMansion. Like, I don't see how that really solves anything.
What if it came
Um,
with
you
land
know,
value tax and major reform to try to make it easier to incentivize those homes that they're actually trying to get developed?
Right, and I hear this a lot from advocates. So it's like, well, obviously, Mike, we'd make all those other reforms. Like, okay, well, then the argument seems to be like, okay, if we got rid of everything that caused the housing crisis, then a land value tax will solve the housing crisis. Well, if we got rid of all the things that cause the housing crisis, we wouldn't have a housing crisis. So I don't see the value because we absolutely need to do these things, right? We need to amend the building code. We need to change zoning. We need to look at development charges. All of these things are necessary, right? And they're all going to be a political fight. All of them are going to be a political fight. So then we're taking all of these political fights that we need to do, and then we're layering on top of that, this basically poison pill for the silent generation boomers and frankly a lot of Gen Xers. We're just picking a fight we don't need to pick. Like, let's do the things that need to be done that we can build consensus on, that everybody agrees needs to be done, in the sort of the advocacy space, rather than layering on this additional fight to try and get Granny out of her home. It doesn't make sense to me. It feels, particularly the talk on Twitter. And to be honest, I think this is actually why I have so much pushback on this. Like, part of it is the policy, but a lot of it is the advocacy. Like, it just doesn't sit well with me because it's very, the tone and the arguments often used are very retributionist. It's like, screw these old people. They've rigged the system. They've benefited. We need to we need them. We need to have payback on this. I'm just like, good luck with that. They outnumber you. They have more free time than you. You are picking a fight you're going to lose. It reminds me of the upcoming fight with Mike Tyson, right? Where you got the young guy. Who is it?
I
I can't.
don't
I'm
have a
terrible.
clue.
You don't have a clue. I'm asking entirely the wrong person, right? But it's just like, why if you're a millennial or Gen Z would you pick a fight with a Gen X Mike Tyson? Kind of feels the same way here. That I just feel that LVT advocates, their heart's in the right place. I like that they're trying to find a solution. I just think they're picking a fight that they don't really need to pick, that there are better ways of going about this.
Meanwhile, I'd like to encourage anyone listening to continue the fight for, I guess, what some people would say is like more fairness in the way that things are done, because just because it's hard and just because it's like feels like a losing battle, like I think young people still need to fight for their generation for fairness that way.
Well,
So don't
yeah,
extrapolate
well,
that to other things.
well, no, absolutely right. So and I certainly do. I am not saying like, hey, don't go out and advocate for things or things like that. Like, I think there's two vices here you can fall into, right? And the first is just saying, okay, we're never going to fix anything. Everything's broken. We're doomed, et cetera, et cetera. Right? Like that is not helpful. But on the other hand, I think you can fall too far the other way where you're just like, let's pick all the fights. No matter what we do, it's going to be hard. So let's not be particularly strategic about it, and let's just go out there swinging. I don't think anything. I don't think either of those polls are particularly helpful. I think we need to find a strategy in the missing middle.
Last question. When should I actually dip my shirt in lemon juice? I actually don't know that one.
Yeah, so when you have an ink stain, it seems to be helpful. So yeah, I know that was kind of a random thing, but it's the kind of thing like you start with the problem that you're having. It's like, oh, okay, I've got an ink stain on my shirt, rather than going, hey, I've got a lemon. What can I do with this? How
So
can I
Gen X
use
of you
this
to
on my
know how to
clothing?
use the pens on how to get rid of ink off of it. I picture you actually with like a notepad and a pen writing versus I'm like, I'll just take out my phone and just start typing it out.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah. I certainly I will admit to that. Thank you for not suggesting I'm using like a quill or anything like that. I
Fair.
think you were actually I thought where you're actually getting to is some kind of like Gen X home economics class, and frankly, it probably was. So this is why we need to bring home ec and shop
True.
back into our high
Now we could
schools.
just Google it. When I got ink on my shirt, I'm just gonna Google what gets ink on my shirt, and I'm sure the first thing that's gonna come up is lemon juice, and then I'll solve it. I don't need a class for this. It's fine.
Yeah. Hey Siri, fix my shirt. I could go with that.
Thank you so much for watching and listening, and thanks as always to our producer Meredith Martin.
Yeah, and if you have any burning questions on land value taxes, or you're one of the advocates who want to tell me I'm wrong, please send us an email to missingmiddlepodcast@gmail.com.
And we'll see you next time.